Silence is the most powerful response there is after a breakup or a betrayal. There is no scream, argument, or complaint that hurts more than your absence, because when you choose to be silent and disappear, you are not losing, you are disarming the other. Noise seeks attention, silence provokes reflection, and in that void, the traitor faces the one thing they cannot control, your decision not to give them power over you. Not reacting is an act of dominance. It's showing that you don't depend on what they say, do, or think. Every word you hold back is a wall. Every step you take away is a declaration of independence. And while the other person expects to see you beg, explode, or justify yourself, you choose a different path, to silently build a version of yourself that doesn't need explanations. True control is not in responding, but in letting silence speak for you. Because there, in that space without contact, is where you regain your strength. Silence is not emptiness, it's strategy. It's the start of your transformation, the ground where you sow discipline, self-control, and a new reality that others will sooner or later see. This is not a video about hate or explicit revenge. It's about something much more intelligent and devastating. Using your silence as the ultimate strategy to master yourself, rebuild yourself, and turn your life into the most compelling proof that nothing and no one can destroy you. Here, you will learn how each act of absence, each gesture of mystery, and each step of personal evolution becomes the most brutal victory they will never be able to ignore. Why are you so sensitive? It's like when someone gently strokes a wound that has not yet healed. It doesn't seem like a blow, it doesn't seem like an attack, but it hurts just as much or even more. That's how the question, "Why are you so sensitive?" works. It doesn't seek answers, it doesn't seek understanding, it seeks to expose your vulnerability so that you yourself become defensive. That's the strategy. To make the problem not the lie, but your way of feeling. To shift the focus so that you stop looking at what they did and start questioning if there is something wrong with you. This type of manipulation is dangerous because it camouflages itself under a seemingly normal tone. It may sound like concern or even an attempt at closeness, but what it really sows is the idea that feeling is wrong, that your reaction is exaggerated, and that you are the one who should apologize. The trap is that, in trying to defend yourself, you enter their game. You start to explain, to justify yourself, to give arguments that you should never give, because the real problem is not your sensitivity, but their lack of honesty. When you accept this mental framework, the liar gains ground. You exhaust yourself trying to prove that you are not weak, that your reaction is logical, that you have the right to feel what you feel. Meanwhile, they achieve exactly what they wanted, to divert attention. The focus is no longer on the lie, it's on you. And that's when manipulation becomes effective, because little by little, you start to distrust your perception, to doubt your emotions, to think that maybe you did exaggerate. Stoic philosophy teaches that what really matters is not how others question you, but how you choose to respond. Epictetus put it clearly, things do not affect us for what they are, but for the interpretation we give them. If you turn that question into a direct attack, you react and lose control. But if you see it for what it is, a manipulation strategy, then you maintain your center. It's not about denying your emotions, it's about not allowing them to drag you into a discussion that should never have existed. Responding calmly is the real strength. You don't fall into the game of justifying yourself or explaining your sensitivity. You can respond with silence, with a firm look, or with a clear phrase that returns the burden to where it belongs. My sensitivity is not the problem. What matters is what you did. That firmness cuts the thread of manipulation because the liar does not find fertile ground to sow their doubt. The key is to remember that feeling is not weakness, it is humanity. The weakness lies in those who need to manipulate to sustain their lies. When you maintain that perspective, You don't get hooked on absurd debates. You conserve your energy and use your clarity as a weapon. And that clarity is what reveals the truth. You are not too sensitive. You are someone who sees what others try to hide. And that is what a liar fears the most, that you look them straight in the eye with the serenity of someone who no longer falls into their traps. 2. You trust me, right? It's like when someone offers you a chair to rest, and as you sit down, you notice that one of its legs is loose. At first, it seems like support. It seems like a gesture of trust. But in reality, it's designed to test if you'll fall into the trap. That's how the question, "You trust me, right?" works. It's not a true invitation to trust. It's a disguised test that seeks to corner you emotionally, where if you hesitate, you seem disloyal, and if you accept, you give ground. It's a subtle form of control, because it doesn't pursue your answer, but the feeling of guilt if you don't fit into what they expect. The problem with this question is that it shifts the weight of the situation. It's no longer about what the other person did or didn't do. It's about you, your level of trust, your loyalty. And in that silent turn, the manipulator achieves what they want: to divert attention. Because if you say, "Yes, I trust you," you close your eyes to the signals that led you to distrust. And if you say no, you immediately become the accused, the person who breaks the relationship. That's the perfect trap, an emotional lockdown that forces you to choose between uncomfortable silence or guilt. This mechanism works because it touches one of the deepest fibers of the human being, the desire to be seen as someone trustworthy. Nobody wants to carry the label of distrustful or ungrateful. That's the door through which manipulation enters. Instead of responding from the logic of facts, they drag you to defend your character as if your integrity was in doubt. And while you try to clarify that yes, you are a trusting person, that yes, you are someone loyal, you stop questioning the most important thing, why they had to ask that question in the first place. Stoicism offers a different path. Marcus Aurelius repeated that true strength lies in not allowing the mind to be dragged by the emotions of others. When someone throws this kind of question at you, what they are really showing you is fear. They're not looking for trust, they're looking for control. Epictetus explained it by reminding us that it is not in our power to change what others do or think, but it is in our hands to decide whether we accept to enter the game or remain calm. The most powerful response is not a long justification or a declaration of loyalty. It's to return the weight to reality. You can respond with something simple and firm. Trust is demonstrated with actions, not with questions. With that phrase, you cut off the manipulation circuit because you don't enter the dilemma they proposed. You place yourself back on the ground where attention should be, on their actions, not on your supposed disloyalty. If you think about it, this question is like a twisted key trying to open the lock of your mind. If you give in, the manipulator enters and arranges the story to their advantage. But if you maintain control, the key doesn't fit and the door remains closed. And that's the most valuable lesson. Trust is not asked for, it's earned. It's not emotional blackmail. It's not a wild card to silence doubts. It's a reflection of the coherence between words and actions. When you remember this, the question loses its poison. It no longer sounds like a disguised accusation or a test that exposes you. It becomes what it really is, a maneuver by someone who fears being discovered. And instead of exhausting yourself explaining your loyalty, you simply stand firm with the clarity that true trust is not answered with words, but with life itself. 3. Are you accusing me of something? When someone throws this question, what they are actually building is a wall. Suddenly you are no longer in front of an open conversation, but in front of a wall that echoes your own words back to you. This wall has a clear purpose: to make you feel guilty for daring to question, to shift the attention from the facts to your way of expressing yourself, and to put you on the defensive. They are not looking for answers. They want you to back down, to doubt yourself, and for the conversation to change direction. This type of maneuver is so effective because it exploits a common fear in everyone, the fear of being unfair. Nobody wants to carry the label of an accuser without evidence. Nobody wants to seem like someone who points or attacks impulsively. And that's where the manipulator finds the opportunity. In the face of your legitimate doubts, they place their trump card, feigned indignation. They present themselves as the victim of your mistrust, as someone hurt by a suspicion they do not deserve. The most damaging part of this strategy is the emotional wear and tear it generates, because it not only interrupts the conversation, but it also plants the seed of insecurity. You start to question whether maybe you were too direct, maybe you sounded aggressive, maybe you should have kept quiet. And that doubt is the poison. Once they trap you in it, the manipulator has control. It's no longer about their actions or their contradictions, but about your mistake in daring to point out the obvious. Stoic philosophy clearly illuminates this terrain. Seneca taught that we should not react to provocations with the emotion they expect from us. The question, "Are you accusing me of something?" does not deserve an impulsive defense or a long explanation. It deserves to be unmasked in silence or with a response that puts the weight back where it belongs. Because it's not you who should justify the suspicion, it's the other person who should clarify the inconsistency. And there's the key. Stay calm and do not give up emotional ground. One way to respond from a firm stance could be with something simple and direct. "I'm not accusing, I'm asking because I need clarity." With those short words, you break the illusion of victimization and keep the focus on the essentials. You can also remain silent and hold your gaze, because sometimes silence reveals more power than any justification. Stoicism reminds us that what is in our control is not what the other person says, but what we choose to do with it. When you don't fall into the trap, the manipulator is left without their favorite resource. They can't turn you into an aggressor or distract you with false offenses. Sooner or later, they will have to face what they were trying to hide. That is the strength of clarity. It destroys masks without the need for shouting or fighting. And it is also the greatest demonstration of self-control, because resisting the temptation to defend yourself against a veiled attack requires more discipline than bursting into explanations. Deep down, this question reveals fear. Fear that their lie will be discovered, fear of losing the control they exert over you, fear that the light of truth will fall where it least suits them. When you understand this, you stop feeling guilty and start to see the situation from a distance. That distance is power. It frees you from the need to get involved in the emotional game and reminds you that your role is not to carry guilt that does not belong to you, but to stand firm in your truth. "Are you accusing me of something?" is not a question. It's a strategy. And like all strategies, it loses strength when exposed. The liar wants you to get agitated, to explain, to lower your voice. 4. Would I ever lie to you? Imagine a scale where someone places a huge weight on one side and asks you to balance it with empty hands. No matter what you do, it always seems like you're at a disadvantage. That's how the question, "Would I ever lie to you?" operates. It sounds sweet, it sounds convincing, it could even seem like a gesture of transparency, but in reality it's a move designed to tip the scale in their favor. Whoever utters it is not looking to clarify, they are looking to close off any possibility of questioning before the conversation even opens. What makes this question dangerous is that it directly appeals to guilt and the need to keep the relationship peaceful. If you say no, you get trapped in an emotional obligation to trust, even if there are signs that arouse doubts. If you say yes, you become the aggressor, the person who disrupts harmony by insinuating betrayal. In either case, the conversation no longer revolves around the facts, but around your answer and the discomfort it generates. The strategy is clear, not to let the truth be discussed, but to make you feel bad for distrusting. This type of manipulation works because it plays with a deeply human value: loyalty. Nobody wants to be seen as distrustful. Nobody wants to carry the label of someone who suspects without reason. And the manipulator takes advantage of this. They pose this question as an emotional shield, knowing that you are most likely to back down so as not to appear unfair. By doing so, they not only avoid answering, but they gain a psychological advantage. They make you doubt your own instincts. The most corrosive effect is that little by little you learn to silence yourself. Every time you notice something strange, you remember that phrase and think, maybe I'm exaggerating, maybe I'm being too suspicious. And so, over time, the voice of your intuition fades while the manipulator's strengthens. That is the real purpose of the question: to erode your internal confidence so that you depend more on the other's narrative than on your own senses. Stoicism offers a different response. Epictetus taught that we should not tie our tranquility to the words of others, but to the coherence of the facts. Wondering whether someone would lie or not is irrelevant if what is in front of you already generates inconsistency. Stoic philosophy reminds us that what really matters are not promises, but actions. Marcus Aurelius insisted on judging things for what they are, not for what they appear to be. That is the key to not getting caught up in these kinds of emotional games. Responding to this question calmly implies not entering the dilemma it poses. You don't need to say yes or no. You can cut off the manipulation with something simple like, it's not about what you would or wouldn't do, it's about what's happening now. With this response, you return the focus to reality and avoid falling into the slippery terrain of assumptions. When you understand this, the question loses its power. It stops sounding like an invitation to trust and reveals itself for what it is, a strategy to silence your doubts. You no longer need to feel guilty for distrusting, because distrust does not come from nowhere. It always has an origin. And the real mistake is not in doubting, but in ignoring the signs out of fear of discomfort. The Stoic lesson is clear. Genuine trust is not asked for. It is earned day by day with consistent actions. A liar can adorn their words with sweetness. They can promise they would never deceive. But if their actions do not accompany, those phrases are just smoke. 5. Can't we just move on? In therapy, there's something known as evasion, a mechanism where the mind prefers to cover a wound with a quick bandage instead of thoroughly cleaning it. That's exactly what the question, "Can't we just move on?" does. It sounds conciliatory, it seems like a call for peace, but in reality, it's a manipulation strategy that seeks to bury the problem without resolving it. It's not an invitation to closure. It's an attempt to silence you to avoid responsibilities. The strength of this question lies in that it disguises itself as maturity. The one who asks it seems to be tired of the conflict and wanting to move forward. But what they really want is to cut the conversation short before their actions come to light. It's a way of turning you into the obstacle, as if you were the one who doesn't know how to let go, when in reality, all you're doing is asking for clarity. The manipulator places themselves in the position of the one who wants peace and leaves you with the burden of appearing as the conflictive person. This tactic wears you down because it attacks your desire for harmony. All of us, to a greater or lesser extent, want to avoid endless arguments. No one enjoys constant confrontation. And under this human need for calm is how they achieve their purpose. They make you feel that insisting on the subject is a mistake, that demanding the truth is exaggerated, that asking for explanations is synonymous with living in the past. Little by little, what should be a right becomes a guilt you carry on your shoulders. The consequence is dangerous. You start to keep quiet so as not to be accused of being stuck. You stop asking, you stop pointing out inconsistencies, you stop setting boundaries. Silence becomes a habit, and the manipulator obtains a fertile ground where their actions remain without consequences. This dynamic not only kills trust, it also erodes your self-esteem, because you feel that speaking is a problem instead of an act of dignity. Stoicism teaches that ignoring what hurts does not mean overcoming it. Seneca warned that time does not heal everything. What heals is the way we face what happens. Moving on is not covering up mistakes, it's understanding them so they don't repeat. Epictetus reminded us that we don't control what others do, but we do decide what we tolerate. And tolerating manipulation disguised as peace is renouncing your own respect. Responding to this question requires firmness without falling into provocation. You don't need to shout or get into a circle of reproaches. You can answer clearly, "We can move on when this is resolved, not before." In this way, you don't accept the label of being conflictive, nor the false idea that demanding justice is getting stuck in the past. You simply return the responsibility to where it belongs, in the actions that need repair. When you apply this approach, you disarm the trick. The manipulator can no longer take refuge in the appearance of peace, because you have made it clear that moving forward is not keeping quiet, but resolving. That's the real meaning of moving on, moving with awareness, not with evasion. The Stoic understands that forced silence is not serenity, it's submission. And real serenity only comes when you can look back without feeling that you hid something for fear of discomfort. "Can't we just move on?" is a disguise for reconciliation, but it's not reconciliation. It's a tool to avoid responsibility. And as long as you don't understand it, you'll remain trapped in the dynamic of keeping quiet so as not to seem problematic. True strength lies in holding the uncomfortable conversation until the problem becomes clear. 6. Why do you doubt me if I've never failed you? In therapy, it's discussed how memory can be used as an anchor. A positive memory, a gesture from the past, or a shared experience can be invoked to justify a present that doesn't fit. This question works in the same way. "Why do you doubt me if I've never failed you?" is a tool that appeals to what was, to silence what is happening now. It's a way to manipulate your trust, diverting it towards a supposedly impeccable track record, even though the current facts are full of cracks. The trick is subtle but powerful. Instead of responding to the legitimate doubt you raise, the manipulator changes the scenario. It's no longer about the inconsistency or the present lie. Now it's about your apparent ingratitude for doubting someone who has always been there. Suddenly the burden falls on you. You seem unfair. You seem disloyal. You seem incapable of recognizing what they have given you. And while you try to defend yourself, they achieve what they were looking for, dodging the responsibility to clarify what's happening. What makes this question dangerous is its ability to trigger guilt. No one wants to be perceived as ungrateful. No one wants to feel like they're betraying the trust of someone close. But manipulation hides in that blind spot. By reminding you of a past without failures, they pressure you to ignore the present. They make you believe that your doubt is unjustified, when in reality, it's a healthy signal of your intuition. That pressure can lead you to silence, to minimize what you see, to accept vague explanations just to avoid being labeled as distrustful. The problem is that this dynamic erodes your perception. Over time, you doubt yourself more than them. Every time a suspicion arises, you repeat the phrase in your head and use it as justification to look the other way. And so the manipulator gains enormous power, the power to make you question your own clarity. This is one of the most effective forms of control because they don't need to convince you with evidence, just with an emotional reminder that ties you to the past. Stoicism offers a clear way out. Marcus Aurelius taught that what's important is to judge each action for what it is, not for what it was before or what it could be after. Virtue is demonstrated in the present. Epictetus emphasized that we cannot give up what we see just because it contradicts what we want to believe. Doubting is not betrayal. Doubting is an act of honesty with yourself. And if someone asks you to ignore reality in the name of trust, what they're looking for is not respect, it's submission. Responding to this question requires firmness without falling into guilt. You can calmly say, "I don't doubt because of what you were, I doubt because of what I'm seeing now." That response breaks the emotional game. They can no longer hide behind a track record because you bring the attention back to the present. Another alternative is to maintain silence and hold the discomfort, because sometimes the absence of justification is the strongest signal that you're not willing to back down. When you choose this path, you regain your power. You're no longer a hostage of a past used as a shield, but the owner of your perception in the present. Real trust doesn't freeze in time, it renews with each action. And if someone demands blind faith appealing to what they never did, they're showing fear that you'll observe what they are indeed doing now. 7. Are you really going to react like this over something so small? In psychology, minimization is discussed as a defense mechanism. It involves reducing the importance of an event to lessen its impact and thus deactivate the other person's natural reaction. That's the essence of this question. Are you really going to react like this over something so small? It's not a search for understanding, it's an attempt to make you feel ridiculous for defending yourself, a tool to invalidate your experience and force you to be silent. The effect is immediate. What was initially legitimate, an act that hurt you or an evident lie, suddenly becomes an unimportant detail. The manipulation lies in making you doubt the magnitude of the problem. You start to wonder if you exaggerated, if perhaps you're too dramatic, if maybe what you felt doesn't carry that much weight. That's the trap. Not to resolve what happened, but to convince you that it's not worth discussing. This strategy is dangerous because it directly attacks your perception of reality. When you accept minimization, you give up your right to set boundaries. Each time you remain silent at the idea that it's something small, the other person gains ground. And over time, what is tolerated ceases to be so small. What was a minor offense becomes a pattern, and what seemed like an isolated mistake ends up being a habit that wears down your peace. Guilt is another tool hidden in this question. Not only do they tell you that you're exaggerating, but they make you feel that your reaction is disproportionate, that you're the one complicating things. Then you justify yourself, explaining over and over why it hurt you, why you point it out. And the more you defend yourself, the more they reinforce the idea that you're exaggerating. The emotional wear and tear grows because you're not just fighting against the fact itself, but against the perception that your reaction is too much. Stoicism provides a clear response to this dynamic. Marcus Aurelius said that what affects man is not the fact itself, but the judgment he makes about it. The manipulator wants to alter your judgment, wants you to believe that what you felt is not valid. But the power lies in regaining your clarity. What hurts you matters. What is inconsistent should be pointed out. What breaks your peace deserves to be confronted. Epictetus reminded us that no one can force you to accept an impression without your consent. And that's the key, not to accept the label of exaggerator when all you're doing is setting boundaries. The best way to respond is not to enter into a debate to prove that you're not exaggerating, because that would be playing by their rules. The way out is to stand firm in what you feel. A clear response could be, small for you, significant for me, and that's why I discuss it. In this way, you cut off minimization and return control to your experience. You can also resort to conscious silence, because sometimes the lack of justification shows more conviction than 1,000 arguments. When you choose not to give in, you disarm the game. You no longer wear yourself out explaining why something matters to you, you simply hold your ground. And that firmness is what the manipulator fears most, because they cannot shape your perception or turn your voice into something insignificant. The Stoic understands that serenity is not about enduring everything in silence, but about having the clarity to recognize what deserves attention and the strength to defend it without guilt. Are you really going to react like this over something so small? Is not an innocent question. It's a maneuver to invalidate your truth. The lesson is not to allow others to define the magnitude of what you feel. 8. Don't you see that overthinking only complicates things? In psychology, it is recognized that reflection is an essential tool for understanding experience and making conscious decisions. However, this very ability can be attacked when someone uses manipulation to make you believe that your analysis is a problem. The question, "Don't you see that overthinking only complicates things?" is a perfect example of how a manipulator tries to deactivate your inner clarity. It's not genuine advice to ease your mind. It's an attempt to silence your doubts and turn off your critical thinking. The mechanism is clear. They seek to present themselves as the voice of calm and simplicity, while painting you as someone who complicates the simple. The trick is to turn reflection into a flaw, so that when you stop to question, you are the one who seems exaggerated or unnecessarily complicated. The strength of this strategy lies in touching a very common weak point. We have all, at some point, heard that we overthink things. That phrase can have an innocent tone, but in the hands of a manipulator, it becomes a weapon. Suddenly, your intuition and attention to detail become a nuisance, and the worst part is that you end up repressing what you see, censoring your thoughts so as not to disturb. The danger is evident. Giving up your reflection leaves you at the mercy of the other's narrative. If you don't question, if you don't think, if you don't observe, you accept without filter what they tell you. That is the manipulator's goal, to reduce your critical capacity until their story becomes the only valid one. Over time, you lose confidence in your judgment and learn to keep quiet every time something doesn't fit, because you fear being pointed out as the one who complicates things. Stoicism has a forceful response to this trap. Marcus Aurelius insisted on the importance of examining our thoughts and directing them towards the truth. Thinking is not complicating. Thinking is freeing oneself from manipulation. Epictetus taught that we should not accept appearances without first examining them. If something doesn't fit, stopping to reflect is not a weakness. It's the greatest show of strength. What really complicates life is not analysis, but voluntary blindness to what is happening. Answering this question requires firmness and serenity. You don't need to defend your way of thinking with long explanations. You can respond with something simple and direct. Thinking helps me see clearly, and I prefer to complicate a moment than to live deceived. This phrase returns the burden to the right place because it establishes that reflection is not a problem, but a protection. You can also keep silent and continue questioning within you, because even if they try to ridicule your analysis, no one can control what happens in your mind if you decide to keep it awake. Manipulation is disarmed when you understand that your ability to think is your greatest defense. Whoever seeks you not to think too much fears that you will discover the truth. And whoever asks you to stop analyzing what is happening actually wants freedom to act without being questioned. The Stoic knows this. Calm is not the absence of thought, it is clarity within thought. Don't you see that overthinking only complicates things? Is an invitation to turn off your judgment and live in the comfort of ignorance. The real answer is in refusing to give up that power. Thinking is the weapon that frees you from traps. It is the fire that illuminates what others try to keep in the dark shadow. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment "I am Stoic" as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your Stoic mind.